I'm Jeff Schwartz of Schwartz Performance, and this is our April 2017 shop update. This month I wanted to start off by doing a little tech talk on LS engines and why they sometimes use oil. The LS engines and all modern engines have much lower tension rings for better fuel economy, less friction, and the side benefit is a little extra horsepower. In the case of the LS engines, the piston rings, the compression rings, are 57 thousandths, I guess it's 1.5 millimeters roughly, and the oil ring is 115 thousandths. A normal old school type engine, like this piston here, is about 80 some thousandths on the compression rings, and 187 on the oil ring, 3/16 diameter. So the compression rings are 50% thicker, and the oil ring is double the thickness of an LS engine. Incidentally, with the different thickness, they also have much more tension, and when you rotate an old school engine versus a new one, you can feel a big difference on how much drag is there. So with the lighter tension rings, there's less force scraping the oil off the cylinders, and there tends to be slightly more oil consumption than some of the older engines. So it's very important to check your oil frequently. And I also have an example here of what happens when you don't check your oil frequently and you basically spin a bearing. This crankshaft here came out of an LSA engine, and you can see this rod journal here is built up with bearing material, and usually when you lose oil pressure by having a low oil level, this is what happens. And most people don't realize that even if it's showing on the dipstick, when you go around a corner, that oil tends to slosh from the side to side from just the forces, and even though you might see some on the dipstick, it'll starve for oil if you get below that full mark. So keep it topped off up at the full mark, and it's not uncommon for some engines to use a quart every 1,000 miles. I think GM officially says that a quart in less than 800 miles is still acceptable. So anyway, check that oil. And lastly, there's one other subject I'd like to talk about on LS engines. Many companies falsely advertise LS 427 engines online at this really great price, and people read that ad and they think, oh, that's an LS7. Well, what they're doing is taking LS3 blocks or L92 truck blocks, boring them out slightly and putting a 4-inch 100 stroke crank in there. So I wanted to just show an example of not a 4-inch 100 stroke crank, but even a 4-inch stroke crank in an LS3 block. Incidentally, the LS7 block has a much longer cylinder liner, and it supports the piston all the way through its stroke, and you don't get any type of piston rocking and things like that happen when you try using the shorter cylinder LS2 or LS3 blocks. Basically all of the LS blocks other than the tall deck LSX and the LS7 have pretty much the same length cylinder liner. And what happens when you put a stroker crank in there is the piston comes out of the bottom of the cylinder at bottom dead center, tends to rock, and then you lose the oil seal and leads to even greater oil consumption, and also piston rattling on startup until the pistons expand and so forth. So here's an example of a piston. You can see this is how far it comes out of the cylinder at bottom dead center. So just barely the top of the piston is in there. Incidentally, the top of the piston is much smaller in diameter than the skirt, and when the skirt leaves the cylinder, the piston tends to rock like this, losing ring seal and causing oil consumption issues. So I don't recommend using a 4-inch stroke crank or 4-inch 100 stroke crank in anything other than the LSX tall deck block or the LS7 block, the genuine LS7. As you can see, this room's filled with chassis waiting to go into projects. We've got 6 of them sitting here. This 73 Camaro, we've got the front sheet metal on it now, and we've rough aligned everything, and we fired it up. It sounds absolutely awesome. Now it's off to the paint shop to have final body work and paint work done. Fat tires never go out of style. So on this second generation Nova, we're mini tubbing it, putting a different rear end in, and wider rims and tires. Well, Shane wrapped up the upholstery work on this 68 Camaro and it looks fabulous. We just have a few more things to button up on the interior, like glove box door and replacing the strikers with stainless ones, and then we got a dyno tune it. We went with blue stitching to kind of tie in the blue stripes on the outside, and then Shane made up this aluminum trim for the door panels, so it gives it kind of a nice elegant appearance. And then we've got some nice door handles here, leather, German velour, suede, really top shelf. On this Chevy 2 Nova, we've got the RideTech 4-link in here along with a brand new Moser 12 bolt. We're just doing a little mod to the upper cross member for clearance for the pumpkin, and it should be on the road real soon. This 63 Chevy, we've got the Flaming River tilt column permanently mounted in here. We've got the factory pedal assembly here blasted and painted, and we've got the drive-by-wire throttle pedal in here. We've also mounted our Vintage Air Gen 3 Magnum unit, and we've got our controls here for right now, and we're going to be making up all the hoses real shortly. 66 GTO, all painted up nice and shiny. Carousel red. Assembly process beginning right now. 69 Camaro that had just come in last month. We've done all the mechanical things, brake lines, etc. Mounted master cylinders, and we're just finalizing the wiring before we can fire it up.